snowstorm to San Diego, and I saw UFO ETs there in space or up overhead, and I was trying to take pictures because I had my Pentax. I remember it was a Pentax, and everybody was telling me to get a Canon, but I was already trained on my Pentax, and I guess folks, but anyway, I was trying to do UFOs there, and then they took me down back across country from there, San Diego, back all the way across I-10 down to Louisiana. I was like, well, I was born in Louisiana, and then they wouldn't tell me, folks. This was all MIB kind of stuff, but I remember it was Navy, and the guy wore jeans and the blue shirt and the little cap, white. So people say, how do you know it was Navy? It's like, well, I was on the base, okay, and I know that the guy, that my social and all that was recorded at Balboa Hospital and they looked up the Social Security and all this. So I'd been. It was really strange. They were telling me I was in the military, and I was like, how can I be in the military? I live in Houston with my husband and my children. I'm like, but apparently I had a double life that I didn't know about, so I don't know how to deal with that. But coming back across, they took me down, or the gentleman took me down to Jesse Marcel's house in Louisiana, and I don't know the year. I've been trying to figure this out because it wasn't important back then. It was just me living my life, so I didn't take notes. But they wanted me, they don't tell me all this time, these people that take me on these excursions but they took me down to talk to him, and when I walked in, it was at midnight. I do remember distinctly that the men in black, which there were other men in black, seriously, back then, that were waiting on us to arrive in the van, and I get out of the back of the van, and it wasn't with, anyway, I can get in all the details later if we ever get a book written, but I get out of the van and go in the house, and there was a man that apparently I was supposed to meet, which was Jesse Marcel, the old man. He was in a wife beater. I don't know if that means anything, but that's what my brain remembers, sitting at a kitchen table, and everybody was asleep, but he was expecting us, but he said I'd missed Stanton Friedman. He asked me one of the first questions if I knew Stanton Friedman, so apparently, whatever year it was, he said I'd just missed Stanton Friedman. So this is really strange because that name stuck in my head, but I got to talk to him about.
Okay,
I was told
just come back to that. We'll have to come back.
Okay, well that's a good spot to start.
You're out of
I'm
time.
in the kitchen.
Remember Stanton Friedman.
Stanton and Jesse Marcel.
So make a note for yourself.
I can't.
Okay,
I don't have any pens.
Karen, your turn.
But I will.
All right. Well, Karen, go ahead. Your turn.
Okay.
Karen.
So I'm going to follow up on that a little bit because we're with the Roswell thing. Excuse me. When my husband and I went, before we went to Roswell, I think we went around 2006. We were driving around in Dallas, and that's when we lost time. And all of a sudden, he realized we were on the highway to Houston. And he said, what time is it? And we had lost 3 hours of time, basically. And he said, we are on the way to Houston. And I said, what happened? And he said, well, I don't know. I said, it looks like we've lost time. He said, yeah, we have. And so we didn't think anything about it. We've had this happen before. We turned around from, the one to Houston, 45, turned around and came back. We were almost to Ennis, and turned around and came back and just kind of forgot about it or just kind of let it go. And then about a week later, he said, why don't we go to New Mexico? And I said, sure, any place in particular? He said, Roswell. He said, do you feel like going to Roswell? And I said, sure, let's go. And I said, what do you want to see? He said, well, let's go check it out. Let's go see what's out there. And it was almost like we were both being drawn to go there. And we went there, and we didn't really know where to go. We visited the museum. This was back a long time ago. And walked around and tried to figure out where it might have been and walked a ways out into the desert And, of course, it was much further than that, but we were drawn there. And nothing really much happened, but we felt the force that had us to go out to that area. And so he wanted us to sit out there in the car for a couple hours to see what we could get. And I felt a lot of energy. Now, I know mine isn't anything like what yours is, TJ, but we were drawn out there. And there may have been things happening that we didn't even know were happening. But it was interesting to me that it came so close to the fact that we had lost the time. And then a couple of weeks later, he suggested we go to Roswell, New Mexico. And so it was always big for him. And, in fact, he crossed over in his Roswell T-shirt. It was huge to him. And he was big. He said he always said he had a military mind. So, anyway, that's my share on it. I don't have any further to go than that, that I feel a real closeness to what happened there. And I can remember being...
You can talk about anything. You have another minute. You can talk about anything. You have another minute and a half.
Another minute and a half. I just think it's important that people start to... There's much more beyond here, that we are forever. We don't die. And so it's all in how we look and understand the knowledge while we're here on the earth plane in school. As to how much we take with us and what we can do when we leave this physical plane, because we're still going to be alive. And I'm not talking about death or advocating that everybody's going to die, but I think it's the transition itself is for people to really start looking at everything. I know I have been, and everybody I know. So that's all I can say. In a minute, is my time up?
No, you still have 50 seconds.
Okay, well, we'll just say it's up.
You can yield if you want.
It's okay. I'll give it to you.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Let me cancel that and I'll start. Okay. So
okay.
It's on. I'm Janet. So our topic right at this moment is Roswell. So I was working at Penn State University, and back in those days, the only people that had the internet were the military and the universities. And so this was in 1989. I moved to State College. So I'd say it was about 1990. And I was so excited that the internet existed, and I started exploring these UFO-L lists. And then at that time, it was just people like Robert Lazar, and then there comes the Roswell story. And so I was very intrigued by it. I don't have the experience with it like TJ does, and I've never been to New Mexico. I've always been in either Pennsylvania. I've been to New Mexico, but I've never went to Roswell, I should say that. So anyway, but I feel very connected to the gray aliens. And so what I put on this webpage is, who are these aliens? So I wanted to, in the next round, especially TJ, do you have any knowledge of what they look like? Because on the Aquarian Radio page, we have a bunch of different types of gray aliens. And I don't know if the Roswell crash people were grays. I wanted to address this with TJ about it wasn't a crash. They were delivered. They were the intention was to reverse engineer it, to have humans reverse engineer so we could catch up with the rest of the world. And then on the page, if you go to aquariumradio.com, I've got pictures of the Roswell crash, but I have these alien interviews with Errol the Gray. And Errol was the extraterrestrial, was taken underground and interviewed. And then there's an Area 51 gray alien that looks a little bit more sinister. And there's a series of recordings which actually has this alien talking. And I wanted TJ and Karen to go through that and examine that information, but I guess they didn't have time or something. So I'm interested in this subject to this level because there's some really important information about the nature of existence, where we come from, how we got to be on this planet, that this is a prison planet. Could somebody please mute? Because I'm getting a lot of feedback. Maybe if you guys mute when we're not talking, we'll get less feedback. I'm not sure what's going on. Okay. But the nature of the universe, how we got here, how life got on the earth, how we get our biological entities, our creatures, our plants and animals. And so I have a past life memory of being a terraformer. One time I got a hypnotic regression. And they said, go back to your first incarnation. And I thought I would go back to, past life where I had bare feet. But when I was directed to go back to my first time on the planet, I found myself in a kind of an environmental suit with boots on. So what came out of me was shocking. As I expressed that I had been a terraformer, and I was investigating, this was part of my project, like my art project with a group of people, and we were trying to figure out what life forms, what beings will we have that will be able to host sentient life, meaning creatures that reincarnate and have what we call lifetimes. So that correlates with the information from Errol the Grey to a degree, where she talked about they have companies that create life forms. And in this Errol the Grey information, she said that a decision was made so that the creatures would eat each other, because I'm trying to find that. I'll find that for the next time. That they developed this technology so that beings could eat each other, so they wouldn't have to continually provide creatures, and they could reproduce. So I'm going to yield with that and back to TJ. Go ahead, TJ.
Okay. I was on mute. Okay, you can hear me now. Okay. So I am muting in between, so I know there's nothing coming from my side. Okay, now
girl.
This is, you asked me to tell certain stories, but I feel like I need to stay on this track for people to listen back how my brain's working, because if I just give them the details, the details you want, then it's sort of anticlimactic. But I need to go back to where I was on this history line, because that's where my brain story. I see visions, folks. So I'm telling the story from the video playing in my head. So I'm in this house. I've come in the front door at midnight. It was all prearranged. There was several men in blackouts. The front. It was sort of strange. There was a lot, but there was at least 3 to 5 on, like they were waiting on it. So it was 2 sets. I would say they were always in teams of 2, but one night I saw them by 1. They'd come at midnight by themselves. But anyway, so I'd gone in. I'm at the kitchen table. There sits Jesse Marcel. I think he was smoking. I don't know if it's just my brain. I don't know all the details. But anyway, sitting there. And he wasn't surprised, but he did ask who this was, because he asked the men, because here I am, a young woman. But they told him that I had worked with. But for a few minutes, I remember there was an argument whether or not I was going to talk to him or not. So I don't know how they made it work, but they did. It's hard to explain. I mean, here you are bringing men that he doesn't know who they are, and he'd been working with Stanton Friedman, so he was I think Stanton only wanted him to give him this story or something. Anyway, it was something about the story that was coming out and who had probably, we didn't say intellectual property back then, but who had the right to know or need to know, and he was prior Air Force, I think. But I didn't know why I was there any more than he did, so I wasn't emotionally involved with whatever I was there for. But anyway, they didn't really necessarily want him to know why I was there, but later on in life I figured it out, because before I went in, the men that from the Navy van, when I got out, and the young guy, he was just the escort, Bobby. But when I went in, the men had said, just see if you can find out where he's